Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to those who are here this morning, because I know that you have chosen to come early, not only to hear the vitamin that we have this morning, but also to have a full liturgical experience. And I pray that you continue to spread the news that church does start at 9:30 and that there is something offered before 9:30. And I'm thankful that you're here early to be with us this morning. I wanted to talk a little bit this morning about baptism. And as I was thinking, we have so many baptisms in this community that I wanted to bring up to you a little bit about why it's so important. And we see it as really the number one sacrament in this particular community because there's so many young children and new families. But baptism is a very important part of our life as a Christian because of the fact that everything revolves around our baptism. Everything. Our entire life revolves around our baptism. And if you remember in the baptismal service, we walk around the baptismal font 3 times, as is similar in the marriage service around the table. But around the baptismal font, it's a reminder that our whole life revolves around our baptism. And what does that mean? That it revolves around dying with Christ and resurrecting with Christ. And we not only do that in the baptismal service, that we are submerged as our death and we are lifted up as our resurrection, but we also do that through the life of the church as well. We do that through the sacraments of the church. We do that most especially through the cycle of Pascha. As we have Lent and we have the Anastasis, we suffer as well, and we reenact and the fasting of Christ, the passion of Christ, and also the resurrection of Christ. So it's not only that happens here, that we revolve around the words of God, but we also live as Orthodox Christians revolving around the life of the church, revolving around the words of God, and also the schedule of services throughout the year. Now, the baptismal service, as we sometimes might think that when we're baptized is when the Holy Spirit comes upon us, and that is actually not true. It's the baptism itself is when we go down, we die with Christ, we resurrect with Christ. We do that 3 times in the name of the Trinity, as Matthew chapter 28 says. But when we come out of the baptismal font, the first thing that happens is the child or the adult is received by the godparent, and then the candidate is chrismated with holy chrism, which is a special oil, which is in a, I want to bring it out here so you can see. It's a special urn that we have that holds the chrism inside of it, and it's rather fancy. But it's a special kind of oil that is not holy oil or holy unction that we have during Holy Week, but it's a special chrism that is made by the Patriarchate, and it is housed in here, and it's actually has a little cotton on the end, and that's what we chrismate anyone who's confirming into the faith or has just been recently baptized. Now, this oil is actually Holy Spirit in a bottle, as I've said before. It's the presence of the Holy Spirit that comes upon those who are chrismated with it and seals the members of the body with the Holy Spirit. So as the person is anointed with this oil, it's on their head in the sign of the cross, on usually their hands, their feet, their chest, their back, as a sign that their whole body is sealed with the Holy Spirit. And then on the back side, it has the scissors, which is the second part of chrismation, which is the tonsuring. Now, I'm sure you've all seen that too when I cut the hairs of those who are chrismated here, and that's really the offering and the gift back to the church. What can a person who stands naked before the Lord give to God as a gift? Besides our love, which He knows, it's our hair, and that is really the most precious thing that we have. And if you look at those who go, women, men are a little more careless about their hair, speaking from experience, but women tend to maintain their hair forever. I mean, so there's beauty shops all over the place, and people really take good care of their hair and trying to look presentable. And that's the one thing that we take pride in that really makes us look finished when we walk out the door. If our hair's a mess, then we look like we just rolled out of bed, and that's the phrase, what did you just wake up or something? But if your hair is fine, then you look finished in the morning. And likewise, with our hair being such a special part of our body, we offer that back to God as our gift to Him, as an expression of our love and as of our giving back to God as a thank you of something that's precious to us. So the reason I brought up baptism today, I'm going to talk all the vitamins until we get through it. I'm going to talk about the different sacraments. I realize we have a 40-day blessing today, but I wanted to talk a little bit about baptism, and then we'll talk about the other sacraments too and the other services. I think it's important for you to have an idea of what the different services are. Not only the baptism, marriage, funeral, unction, all these different services, but I'd really like to go through that with you so that you understand a little bit more about what's happening. Now, the baptism, obviously, we could probably talk for an hour and a half about baptism and not cover everything. But I wanted to remind you that everything that you do in life that is good keeps you revolving around the baptismal font. All those things that we do that are bad for our lives really kind of put something over the top of us. And confession is the way to reach again the state that we were in when we were baptized or chrismated. It's the way to remove those parts of our life so that we can again regain our true baptismal state, which is that purity, that holiness, and also working towards moving closer to God. Now, I wanted to ask too, since we have a minute or so, does anybody have any questions about baptism at all? I know that sometimes people say, is the baby supposed to go all the way under the water? Which I've had people request, which I do not do. Some priests do that. I've seen children get sick from that, ingest water, and I don't want to be responsible for that. Typically, what the typical way that I learned and all my classmates who are priests all over the country learn is to go down to the shoulders and then to put water on the hand and put it over the head of the child. That doesn't make it less of a baptism than going all the way under the water. It doesn't make it more of a baptism either. It's just to be submerged in the water 3 times. That's the important thing, is the Trinitarian baptism. So it's 3 separate times. And usually children will sit in there and kind of splash the water too, so they kind of get it in their face, which is a good part of baptism for children. Adult baptisms, which are not uncommon, since I've been at this community, I think I've done 3. Yeah, I believe it's 3. Typically what happens is they stand in front of the baptismal font and they lean over the font, and the water is poured over their entire body as they lean over the baptismal font. Typically they wear a robe, a white robe with a bathing suit underneath. The robe does not come off. They're baptized in the robe, but when they're done, they're completely drenched, and then they're wrapped in a towel, and then they go change. And it's very similar to the regular baptism of a child. They're chrismated as well. They receive communion. Their hair is cut. But the only real difference that we see for a baptism of an adult or a larger person is that they are on the outside of the font, because obviously they can't get inside the font. So we pour the water, we reach in, take the water from the inside of the baptismal font, pour it all over them, and then do that 3 times. It's a beautiful service for an adult as well, because usually it's the adult who is chosen to follow in the Orthodox way of life. So it's a very special and emotional time for the adults. It's also emotional for children, but I think it's more traumatic emotional for children, where as adults it's just emotional. So those are some of the things I wanted you just to go over with you, and to remember that some scholars write in the Orthodox Church, the single most important sacrament for us to start to return closest to God is baptism. To go back to that baptismal state, to go back to that original place where we were when we were baptized. And they say Holy Communion, the Eucharist, is of course the pinnacle of sacraments, But it's very important to return back to that way that we were at our baptism, which was a state of purity, a state of holiness, and a state of openness to God and working towards moving closer to God. So as you go throughout your day, I always recommend to people, if you have pictures of your baptism, to look at them every once in a while and look at that little baby who was there, or maybe that young adult who was standing there, and go back to that and try and remember how that was for you, and how your life was back then, and how it's come now, and where are you exactly? Are you closer to God, or are you further away? And if you're further away, you need to return back to that baptismal state.